Fantastic. I think we're live. Can we hear ourselves? Just want to welcome people. Want to be sure that we are live. I think we are now. Let's go. So welcome. It's really good to have you here for this, what we're calling a soft launch of Connect to Change. And really the whole idea of this is to share what we've been up to for the last 15 months to build a broader audience and hopefully to engage more people and build support for what we think is a really important thing, trying to get us all to drive more systems thinking in the built environment and hopefully some positive systems change. So we've not got long together, it's just an hour. And what we thought we'd do in this time is start by providing a little bit of an overview of what we've come up with, just to share it, just to get into it. And then I'll introduce a panel, the steering group that has been working in the background, helpfully steering this work that we've been doing. So we'll get perspectives from each of the people in the panel and then have a little bit of a chat. So hopefully that will give you a good idea as to where we're all coming from, what we're doing, and then we'll move to some Q&A. So please do use the function to submit your questions, and then we'll come to those. We probably won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll pick as many as we can, get through those, and then we'll sift through the questions which you can't get to and come to them later. And then after that, what we'll do is just have a little bit of a forward look, what we're going to do next, where we're going from here, and then we'll close. So I hope that works for you. And I'll kick off now just by giving a bit of an overview of what is in this document. And the whole idea of it really is to unlock the value of systems thinking in the built environment. So what is it? What is it we're talking about? I'll start off by saying the process that we've been through. And I've already mentioned it's been about 15 months now. And we've slowly been building a bigger community and a bigger consensus around this need for systems thinking. So we started off with a small number of people doing some one-to-ones, then doing some workshops, collating all the information together, trying to put it into some sensible order, some kind of structure. We identified the key points that kept coming up and then gave some kind of narrative flow between those points. Then we wrote it all down. We found out that it was way too long, so we had to write it in a much shorter document, and that's what we're sharing now. And then we circulated it back around the community, got lots of feedback on it. And so we've been going through this process, which is as illustrated on this diagram, starting in the middle, building ever wider. And so today, this soft launch is the next step in that process, where we're trying to share what we've come up with about 250 people involved in it so far. We're now trying to share it wider to build that engagement and also build support. So that's what today is about. When it comes to what we've actually pulled together, I'd just like to really quite briefly run through what that is. And the starting point for me is the scope. What is it that we're talking about? We're talking about the built environment, this amazing thing that we live in, that consists of our economic infrastructure, social infrastructure, and the interface with the natural environment. You add all of that together and you get this phenomenal thing, this most complicated machines that humanity's ever built, and that society utterly depends on. If the built environment doesn't work, then society doesn't work. You know, it's super important. But sometimes we don't notice it because we live inside it. And I think one of the things which we can say about our built environment with all these complex interconnections and interdependencies is that it is actually a system of systems. Now, not everyone likes that language, but it's kind of a fact. That's what it is, and that's what we have to deal with. However, the way that we run the built environment very often is in silos. And these silos kind of go from top to bottom. And it's very difficult to get the communication to work across those silos. So we already have a bit of a problem here with very connected systems, but the way we run it is not connected. Then we've got another big problem, which is that the challenges that we face in the built environment are also really connected. And I guess the biggest one of those is climate change. But if we think about it, there's all sorts of other challenges which affect the whole of the system. And because they affect the whole of the system, we can't solve them in silos. We need joined up solutions to joined up challenges. And these would include achieving energy security, or providing climate resilience, or moving towards a circular economy, or protecting biodiversity. We could go on. This is a long list of really major challenges that we simply can't address unless we're better joined up. And so I think we can summarize what the problem statement is that we've got these connected systems and very connected challenges, but we've got siloed organizations and also siloed information. So even if the organizations, if we got our act together and we were more connected, we still wouldn't be able to do the job properly because our data and our information is in silos. So what we've got to address really is informational and institutional silos. And in the built environment, just because of its very nature, because it's so long-lived, we really need to have an approach which is strategic and long-term and joined up. So this is what we need. This is kind of the problem. And we think if we're going to now turn to the solution, we think that what becomes really important to address all of this is to advance systems thinking in the built environment, to be much more joined up, in other words, but also to drive some positive systems change, because it's not going to be enough just to think in more joined up ways. We also have to act in more joined up ways and probably change some of the systems, because in some cases, the systems kind of are the problem. And so thankfully, in this space, there's an awful lot that we can call on. And so often the built environment seems to be late to the party on new things. We could look at digitalization or all sorts of other things that other sectors have long used. The built environment sometimes is kind of at the end of the queue of adopting these. And in the case of systems thinking, these are approaches which have been proved elsewhere. And so it's actually good news for us because we don't have to invent new stuff here. What we can do is learn from what other sectors have done. And we can bring the best of these various different systems approaches to the built environment. And that would include systems science and complexity science and cybernetics and systems dynamics. All of these things exist and are proven, and there are approaches and tools and methodologies which already work. We can bring them in a much more comprehensive and concentrated way to the built environment. And I think that if we're doing this, probably the overarching point is that we need to focus on the outcomes, not just outputs from projects. And if we're focusing on the outcomes, which basically means better outcomes for people and nature, that will be some kind of combination of economic, social, and environmental outcomes. If we're focusing on the outcomes, then we need to understand the systems better so that we can intervene more effectively and get those better outcomes. And I think in the industry that we work in, very often we concentrate on the interventions, we concentrate on the projects. Now they're super important. Projects are still the very best way of getting stuff done. However, in order to drive the better outcomes, we do need to focus on getting more out of the systems. So that's a high level message. It's an easy thing to say and not an easy thing to do. But like I say, the approaches are all proven we can bring them. And if we're going to do this, I think it's quite helpful for us to know that we can apply these systems approaches pretty much to any system we choose. You could apply it at the level of the planet, or at the level of the country, or a city, or the energy network. We can choose which system we look at, and different systems will be relevant to different people. But there's an approach that we can use that basically means we can bring the best of the systems thinking to whichever system we're considering. So the first thing is to know the scope, know what we're looking at. The second thing is around the outcomes. It's about defining what it is we're trying to achieve. And what we'll always notice is that the existing systems probably don't give the outcomes that we want. And so that creates a delta in the outcomes. It's a difference between the outcomes we're currently getting from the current system and the outcomes that we want. And that will drive the improvement that we need to achieve. Second thing is then to identify and understand the systems better. What are the interconnections? What are the key components? Where are the leverage points? What is it that we can do that will drive the most outcomes for the least input? And then we can come up with those effective interventions. That's not the end of the story, because after all of that, we need to observe, learn, and repeat. Because what we find with complex systems is that when you do an intervention, you get unintended consequences. And so we really need to understand what the impact is of our interventions, learn from it, and then go back around the cycle. So in very simple terms, that's what we can apply. And then if we want to do this, I think that there's a logical way forwards. And in the paper, we've made a number of recommendations which are connected. It's a good thing that they're connected because it's a systems paper. And I won't run through all of these just now, and you can look at them in the paper. But really what it starts off with on the left-hand side is the suggestion that we should undertake a systematic review, understand the performance of our existing systems, understand how those relate to current outcomes, understand the economic value of our existing systems, so that then we can start the whole process of intervening and making better outcomes come. The other thing which is really key to kick it all off is this idea of a network and getting different communities to work together to unlock this value. And I think that as we work through these recommendations, we can get to a point where we are connecting a variety of different important things to drive change. We would be establishing communities that would have some kind of ownership of driving change in their own area. We would be building consensus, because really we need to have some kind of shared understanding so that we pull in the same direction. And then together we would be driving change. So in very high level terms and very briefly, I've run through what the paper says. I'd really commend it to you. Have a look at it, engage with it, come back to us, see where it would be good to get involved. But what I'd really like to do now is move to the panel, because we've had some fantastic engagement from all sorts of people over the 15 months. But this panel has been with us from the beginning. And this panel is the steering group of this work that we've been doing. And so I thought it would be really good to hear from each one. And I just invite each one to provide their own perspective. And then what we can do is have a little bit of a chat in the panel to kind of pull together some of these thoughts. So to start off with, I'd like to turn to Anna. And Anna, why are you here? Why is this important?
It's a big question. Hi everyone, I'm Anna, and it's really kind of great to be here today. I'm really excited about this launch. I think for me, kind of why I'm here was we need to do something about these interconnected challenges. There's no other option. Things like climate change, we just need to address them. And I think without systems thinking, a lot of people kind of operate in their own organisations and silos, and they don't see a way to solve these interconnected challenges because they're seen as kind of so far out of their immediate remit and control. And they almost sometimes kind of say, oh, well, that's not my responsibility because it's so influenced by this other area, and climate change is so connected. For example, how can my one actions influence this? And I think systems thinking kind of gives people the power to actually change that, because you're thinking about how the system all works together, and it kind of prevents that being a barrier for change. So when the paper talks about kind of imagining a time where actually cities are resilient to climate change and shocks and that kind of better future, I think I'm so passionate that we need to get there, that I can't see a better way apart from systems thinking, and without it I don't know how we'll achieve it. So I think that's really what drew me to being involved.
That sounds pretty compelling. You would make me want to get involved just listening to you, actually. And Jess, what would you what's got you involved, and also what do you think is kind of the most important thing that we should be doing here?
Yeah, so I think when we speak about unlocking the value of systems thinking in the built environment, that unlocking piece, obviously there's frameworks and methodologies, like you said, that have been around for systems thinking for a very long time. But I'm very keen on the other part that we speak about, which is the mindset and culture shift. I remember kind of in this co-creation process, we had a lot of people talking about the need for a mindset shift and thinking in a different way that we have been brought up in. I remember one specific contributor saying that kind of people are born systems thinkers and education can sometimes beat it out of you. And while that does sound quite blunt, it does show the case that from a very young age, people are brought up into subjects, into silos, into specializations. And although they're very useful and you need that reductionist kind of point of view, people do need to kind of be educated in a way that allows them to handle complexity. And systems thinking is that. It provides a way for people to navigate and understand the interconnectedness within the built environment, but also beyond that. And having that as a tool for kind of navigating the complexity of the different challenges we're facing, like Anna was saying, with climate change and biodiversity and resilience, that we need that mindset shift. And it's why we have made a point about education within the paper. And I'm quite passionate about that, that in order to get the leaders of the future in the built environment, in industry and government to be using systems thinking, it needs to be starting from that level. And so the kind of mindset needed within that is
Yeah, I really love that point, actually, because I think there's something about our individual mindset, but then there's also something about our collective mindset, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things which it feels really important for us to do, is kind of to bring people together around a collective shared mindset. And I think that building a shared understanding is core to that.
Yeah, because not everyone needs to be an expert in systems thinking, but they at least need to be aware of their role and the impact they play within a system, or to that point, or be aware that they exist within a system. And that in itself is a fundamental for ensuring that we have collaboration kind of in the future. So this isn't to say to everyone to go away and become an expert in it, but at least be aware of the system that they exist within.
And I love that point as well, actually. I want to come to Yvonne in just a moment, but the reason I just want to come back to what you say there is because it illustrates systems thinking in itself, because it's as if each one of us has a part to play, but then when we're joined together in a system, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And that feels to me one of these kind of fundamental things about systems thinking. So Jess, thank you. Yvonne, what do you reckon? Well, firstly, introduce yourself briefly, but what do you reckon? What is it that we should actually be doing?
Right, so I'm Yvonne. I have ended up involved in this by pure chance. I had a colleague in the office run into me and told me there is a very interesting systems thinking workshop going on. I'm Jacob's systems thinking lead. I think you should join me. So I agreed and went to the workshop. And I was drawn into all of this for a number of reasons. The one is I've been doing systems integration and system assurance on railway programs for about 30 years now. And I've just seen too many times the programs not delivering the outcomes and the vision, or not even having a vision and outcomes defined for a very long time when they start. And at the same time, I've seen few that actually have done the proper system thinking from the beginning and delivering on time and the cost and the whole vision and outcomes that were required. So what really drew me into this group, and Mark and Jess and Anna were actually running that first session I was involved, was first the energy, a very positive energy and the drive of the group to actually do something good and change things. And the second bit was the proper system approach, a comprehensive approach to what is the problem, looking at people, looking at the culture, I just mentioned, looking at actually identifying what the proper problem statement is, at the framework, how we can actually do it through establishing a community and share the knowledge and practice and understanding and so on and so on. So I really hope that it will take off. And I've been involved in similar initiatives before that usually end up with a white paper being published, and then that's the end of the story. And the final reason I really got involved is that our vision is to actually continue pushing for it through establishing this connective and sharing the knowledge and sharing the understanding and influencing the industry for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point as well. This is not just about publishing a white paper and saying job done. It's about trying to get people to kind of coalesce in communities and then actually drive the recommendations forwards, which is actually a really good segue to Wolfgang. So Wolfgang, do introduce yourself and what is it that you would like to say about the recommendations?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'm Wolfgang, and I'm a former executive director at the Connected Place Catapult. And one of the key things that's always been important to me is to look at system thinking and use it to represent our actual socioeconomic environment, because we are living in an interconnected world. And so it is important to recognize that in the way we act, as Mark was saying early on. And so that this group obviously had a starting point of trying to create a shared understanding, because that is the basis of it. But we felt it was important to then include also recommendations to go beyond this just being a theoretical exercise that then gets shelved somewhere. This paper is really focused initially on creating consensus amongst system thinkers and others alike, but also then we need to help start bridging that understanding with a key action. So whilst the shared understanding outlines what system thinking in the built environment is about and why it's important, the recommendations really start to translate that understanding into clear next steps, making it then actionable for policymakers, practitioners, and stakeholders, which is why we've grouped the recommendations into 3 primary categories in the first instance: policy and governance, people and capabilities, and then frameworks and methodologies. And they're in essence clarifying how to apply system thinking principles within the built environment. They really start to provide that mechanism to offer a common roadmap for diverse stakeholders and really enable them to align their effort and drive positive outcomes and drive positive impact. So they show the practical relevance, in other words, of system thinking and really encourage that real world adoption. And there's one in particular I would like to highlight here amongst the 9 recommendations that we've put forward. And that's the one around embedding system thinking in education and training curricula, and really establish that common and clear and effective competency framework. I think many of us are likely to agree that most problems originate from education. In fact, if you look at education research, psychology research, most formal education systems, especially in the STEM fields, train people in reductionist thinking by default. And the same applies obviously in a business and policy-making context. And so from my perspective, the most important recommendation strategically to be able to reap the benefits of system thinking long-term, and thereby also ensuring in some sense the survival of our planet and species, is by ensuring that system thinking is embedded at the core of the education system from a very young age onwards. In some sense, it needs to become second nature, so that future leaders can make truly informed decisions that are focused on the best possible outcomes for our planet and our people. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, the Connective was established. It started really with the idea of acting as a catalyst, so to speak, to convene different communities and to create that shared understanding and to generate consensus through that shared understanding of system thinking in the built environment. And so what I'd like to underline, obviously, here, what's quite important is that the focus here is on connecting and not reinventing the communities that can jointly drive change to improve outcomes for our planet and our people. So there's a value there already in terms of acting as a catalyst. But then there's also value in acting as an enabler to drive that change. I then started by playing a coordinating and influencing role to enable effective governance, sharing good practice, effective feedback, with one of the ultimate goals being the rationalization of the infrastructure and investment, and also enabling the optimal utilization of current and future resources in the built environment and the broader green infrastructure. And then there may well be a role also of the Connective in terms of driving actual change, being part of that journey, not only enabling to drive the change, but also driving that change. So, for example, in joining up existing communities across sectors to co-develop, let's say, key priority challenge areas and roadmaps to enact connected change, to work closely with regulators, including, for example, the new Regulatory Innovation Office and with policymakers to ensure joined up policy making. So there are a number of key roles, and obviously that evolves as we evolve as an organization together with all of the communities. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll hand back to Mark.
There's so much, Wolfgang, I'd like to dig into in what you say there, and we'll have an opportunity in just a moment to have a chat between us. But the thing I would just want to underline in what you said was this whole focus on connecting, because it would be a huge irony if what we were to do was create another silo. And clearly what we're wanting to do here is make connections, because there are all sorts of people doing fantastic things in this space. We just kind of want to encourage them to be connected up. So massively important point. Thanks, Wolfgang. And so, Alexandra, last in line, but not least for sure. So please introduce yourself and your perspective.
So, hi, I'm Alexandra. I wanted to take us back to why does this matter? So firstly, why does the built environment matter? Because at the end of 2020, the mass of everything that we've built outweighed the mass of all the living things on the planet, and it's only continued to move in that direction. So the built environment's really important, and so are we. Built environment's key to tackling those challenges that Mark put up when you're talking about climate change, pollution, health inequalities. They're all centred around the built environment. But it also provides huge opportunities, both for a better quality of life, but also for better commercial value and outcomes. So why do systems matter to the built environment? I hope you've already got a very good idea from what my colleagues have said, but the built environment is essentially a system of systems. Our planet is the ultimate system of systems, whether you're talking about the social, economic, natural environment, but also beyond that, finance and healthcare, education, societal systems are all linked up. And if we can get our systems to work together, we reduce our risks, we increase our resilience, and we create much greater opportunities. We give ourselves the ability to change in a complex and really uncertain world, and a chance to build a future that we want, one where people and the planet can flourish together for generations to come. So getting the most out of what we have now, making intelligent additions to the built environment system, improving the performance and effectiveness of the whole of the built environment. And what would that mean? If you can imagine, we could have healthy cities that are resilient to climate shocks and natural disasters, buildings and infrastructure that aren't just functional, they're regenerative, and stakeholders that are empowered to co-create their built environment. That's the promise of systems thinking. But we need to act now, and we need to act together to allow our industry and our people and our planet to thrive. There's a lovely quote from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He talks about cooperate or perish. That's what systems allow you to do. Collaboration is key, joining up people, joining up data, joining up organisations. That's what systems change is all about. And that's why I'm really keen to share this work on systems and to see the built environment come together across our sectoral and organisational boundaries, across technologies, to create this future with our vision for the built environment where people and the nature flourish together for generations. So this is a call to all change makers, wherever they are, to be part of a movement to bring systems thinking into the built environment, to make it business as usual, to unlock the value of the built environment. This paper, this Connect to Change, is just the first step. And that's all I'd like to say.
Well, that's a fantastic thing to say. And I think when you add up what everyone has said around the panel, we get to something which is really powerful and actually really coherent as well. I like the way that what everyone has said kind of fits together. One thing which I'd like to maybe ask before we go into the Q&A from the people out there is this question about value, because I guess there needs to be a pretty clear value statement as to why we should do this. Like, what's the point? Because it might make sense, it might be a very nice thing to have things connected together, but like, what is the essential value statement? And I guess one of the things which I see in this is that systems thinking enables us to get better outcomes for less input. You know, I think that's probably the essential value statement. But I was just wondering if if someone might like to kind of come back on where you see the value of this work, people coming together to drive not just better systems thinking, but also some positive systems change.
Well, maybe perhaps, as I did mention at the beginning, I spent nearly 30 years working on large railway programs, London Underground, Network Rail, and so on. And the thing about railways is that it is a mini built environment. Anything you can think about in built environment, you will find at least a little bit of it in a railway system. In my experience, and I worked on 6 or 7 really large programs in kind of measure of spend. One of them burned £1.5 million a week. Delivering or not delivering, the program was spending £1.5 million every week, and it was going on for 15 years. If the system thinking was applied from the beginning, and the very good example is Victoria Line upgrade, the program delivered exactly what it was set out to deliver, and on time and pretty much on cost. The Victoria Line, as an example, actually invested heavily in really pinning down firmly what are the outcomes that are required from that upgrade, and then making sure that we apply system thinking in scoping the work, identifying the challenges, managing the risks, everything throughout. There are other examples where the large programs didn't do that from the beginning, or didn't really apply it thoroughly, and ended up having not delivering what was required, as well as overspending and being years late. And again, too many to mention, so I'm not gonna name any. But this is a kind of my personal experience from where is the value of doing the system integration or systems thinking from the beginning, and making sure we deliver the outcomes as an assurable deliverable that actually gets done in time.
I think it's really good to hear that kind of hard-won experience from real life. And I think we should go to Q&A just now, but it's probably just one more thing I'd like to say on this thing about value, is that we clearly can see the value of systems thinking in delivery, and we can bring a lot of value in that space. And I think that systems engineering has a particular value to play in delivering new infrastructure. But I think what we can see is the untapped value across all of the infrastructure that we already have. So what we're talking about here is not just about delivering new assets. It's about the operation, the maintenance and use of existing infrastructure and getting the very best we can from what we've got. And it does seem to me that in cash-strapped times, that's one of the key things which we have to do. We have to get better value from what we have. Anyway, time for Q&A, and Alexandra, I'll hand over to you for that.
Thanks, Mark. And we've got some great questions, and if you have any more, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. So from Abby Booker at the University of Warwick, she's working on MSc around systems change, which is super exciting. And her question is, what needs to happen to education and training? So Wolfgang, I'm going to go to you if I may.
Sure, thank you for that question. I would argue that changes need to happen from the very start, because in fact, the way of thinking of human beings evolves so quickly that by the age of 2, most of the characters of children are formed, and the way of thinking. And if we truly want to achieve for the next generations and assure, the system thinking being ingrained as part of business as usual, to me, the starting point has got to be really at the very start of life. Now, that's a longer term play, obviously, and making sure that this gets incorporated in an appropriate format for the different age groups. Then, of course, we have to deal with the more immediate and tactical nature of what we need to do to change the mindset of individual people and the culture in organizations. And that will require dedicated training for current leaders, so that leaders are equipped to use really the correct approach to drive the right decisions with all the information at their fingertips, and really understanding the interdependencies and the downstream impacts that some of these decisions may have. And we could look at many different examples here. For example, if you look at the sustainability angle and transport wants electric vehicles to decarbonize. But what does that mean in terms of all the other systems that feed that transport system? This means that the supply chain needs to decarbonize, but we also know that the decarbonization of the supply chain may potentially come at the cost of chemical pollution through mining. So there's some trade-off which can only be applied through the application or achieved through the application of system thinking. And it is quite important that this really gets ingrained from a very early stage onwards, all the way to current leaders, making sure that we bridge the gap currently to make sure we can address the current challenges, but also prepare for the future, so that longer term it becomes all too natural, so we don't even have to have these kind of conversations.
Okay, Jess, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I'm seeing other questions come through as well about the differing kind of things that are already out there, and it's the fact that systems thinking has been around for a very long time, and there are a lot of people educated in it. So I think what we're looking for here is the common language and agreed consensus on that, and that then forms a basis for the education and capability improvement to improve overall industry capability, and seeing kind of new leaders come through. And we're very conscious that there is like a lot out there that already exists, but I think it's just the fact that we need to now be kind of all connected in that point with a consensus on what we take as our common language moving forward, and bring that into kind of younger generations coming through, and make an active effort to bring that into schools and universities, because I think that's really important, that you can see kind of students heading into universities and being struck by the need to do critical thinking and not being able to handle the complexity that we face when we talk about kind of the wicked challenges going on in the world. So that needs to be brought in from a very young age, and it takes kind of having a real agreed approach and common language that hopefully this shared understanding is like the first step within.
We've got a couple of questions here that are quite similar, one from John Lavery, one from Arnab, talking about how does this paper in the initiative relate to, for example, ICE system approach to infrastructure delivery and various other systems initiatives out there. Mark, could you
So I'd maybe take that one. So I think that they fit really well, because that work that the IC has done in the past was really focused on delivery. And there's some great thinking in there. I'd highly commend that paper. Andrew McNaughton led that, did a really good job of bringing a systems approach to delivery. And I think, as an awful lot of us would recognise, delivery really needs that. It really needs a kind of a more joined up approach. And part of the reason in the context of delivery that it needs it is that what we tend to do is take a problem, break it into lots of pieces, tick each of the boxes and think that the job is done. Whereas that work that Andrew led shows that that's not enough, that what you've also got to do is see how each of those pieces comes together into something that works. And so that is systems thinking in the context of delivery. What we're talking about is systems thinking in the context of the whole built environment. Now, delivery is a really important part of that, but the statistics that we have at the moment would indicate that we have something like 99.5% of the built environment that we need already. And then each year we add 0.5% to it. So that systems approach to delivery is relevant to that 0.5%. And I guess what we're saying is that systems approaches are relevant to the 100%. It relates to the operation, the maintenance and the use of everything that we already have, and not just delivering new stuff. And so the fit together is actually perfect, because we need to have systems approaches in delivery, but we also need to have systems approaches beyond delivery into how does it work with everything else that we've got. So in answer to the question, the fit should be perfect. We've got some work to make it perfect, but the idea is that it would be really good.
And that's the whole ethos of this group, is to work with others who've done great work in other areas and bring it together. Look at the whole. What a great question from Andy Gordon here. I'm going to come to you, Eva. I'll just give you the heads up on the challenges about how to make the connection between systems thinking and implementation strategy and construction engineering. I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
If I'm not mistaken, it's Andy Gordon that used to work with me in London and England before. So maybe not, but that doesn't really matter. It's really looking at the entire problem area, analyzing it, making sure we properly identify the interfaces and the risks and manage them. And systems thinking is all about holistic thinking, looking at the whole thing. And as I said, I've just seen too many examples of different construction things going wrong because people focused only on their little scope of work as a project. So if you're thinking about large construction as a program, the programs are usually made out of anything between 30, 50, 60 projects. Projects are focused on delivering their scope of work, not really interested in how it impacts the rest of the remit and the rest of the scope. And very often the programs actually start without having a clear overall objective. What are the outcomes that need to be delivered? And I think this is the missing link on one side. On the other side, very briefly, what is really missing about what Mark just mentioned, the great paper from ICE and other places, pretty much most of the systems engineering literature and guidance and standards and notes are focused on delivery, on projects. There is very little of it that actually looks at the entire life from conception through use, operation, maintenance, eventually decommissioning, later on refurbishment, and so on and so on. And most importantly, what is it that the whole system or a built environment does for us? Because we're building it for us, we're not building it for aliens. And we really need to look at that and make sure it does what we need it to do.
Absolutely. There's some great questions here, so we're going to keep going with them. So Ron Lang's asking, he said, in the context of public infrastructure, why do we think, or there has been a reluctance to embrace systems thinking? But the bit I'd really like to actually ask you, Anna, is have you got any ideas about how we can bring decision makers with us on this journey? Because, you know, as Ron said, this would help governments to communicate more effectively with the public, and particularly in these times of economic challenge. So what can we do?
I think it's a really good question, because as we've been talking about earlier, a lot of this is about a mindset shift. And I think we've been really fortunate that a lot of the policy is moving in the direction of really focusing on outcomes and improving outcomes. And I think most people can kind of understand why those outcomes would be beneficial to get to. And I think if we shift our language to talking about improving outcomes, so when we're talking about safety, we're talking about creating a green future, sustainable businesses, I think people will be able to relate to kind of those are things that they want to achieve, and it's not one kind of single solution that's going to get you to that outcome. So I think bringing leaders along with that, it's partly saying, you know, it's not your fault that we haven't got these outcomes. It is a really interconnected, complex thing. But we've kind of got tools here that already exist that we can kind of educate people with. And I think like having that common shared understanding of how we can reach and improve those outcomes should help leaders understand why this is something that's really kind of helpful for them.
Yeah, just something to add into that, because I think Ron kind of picks up on a really important point, and the engagement with the public on this. And I feel that one of the best ways of doing that is by engaging in the discussion, the discourse around outcomes, rather than just about inputs. We would be talking about health outcomes rather than just how many new hospitals we would build. Now, clearly, new hospitals are part of providing better health outcomes, but so are many other things. And I think that if we start with the outcomes, and using health as an example, if what we're aiming for is better health for the nation, then we can see that the built environment has loads to offer in terms of leading to those better health outcomes. which would include things like healthy transport options, green spaces. It would include doing work around air quality, maybe even stuff about social housing that doesn't have mold. All of these things are built environment solutions that contribute to better health outcomes. And so I think that with this systems approach, what we end up doing by focusing on outcomes is having a way which is actually more accessible for people to engage with, because then they can talk about the outcomes they want rather than the outputs from construction. And then I guess another tiny point to add on to that is that with the kind of approaches which are now available with systems thinking, it does provide a better way of addressing trade-offs. And we will always have to have trade-offs because we don't have infinite resources. But systems thinking enables us to make better trade-offs. And that's absolutely crucial.
That's key.
And if I may just add to that as well, I think one of the key challenges that I've always seen is that the transition towards a more systems thinking type of approach is difficult because it's often seen as too complex, and given the risk-averse culture that we often have, it then prevents going that extra step. Yet we also need to recognize that systems thinking provides that manageable way forward to really ensure, as Mark was just saying, that we can assess the trade-offs and make sure that we make the right decisions that create optimal outcomes collectively across the board. So taking a much more holistic view and diminishing the risk that is perceived in the first instance.
Thanks, Wolfgang. Ivan, did you?
But there's just one thing, actually, Wolfgang touched on that as well. I think that the systems engineering, systems thinking community so far has almost been the worst enemy to itself. We need to learn to talk the language that other people can understand and communicate what we are doing. Very often we're using phrases and terminology that even between ourselves we don't agree upon and don't necessarily understand each other when we're talking. The others don't have a chance to actually get that. And I'm really very passionate about this and kind of had a plain English campaign when I was in London Underground and in Network Rail about systems thinking, about systems integration and systems assurance. And when you make this one little bit of effort, when you communicate to other people, actually you get phenomenal response. I have not yet come across a senior person in railways or now some other sectors I'm working in with Jacobs, that after spending 10-15 minutes to try to explain in plain English what is it we're actually talking about, that has pushed back on it. Quite often, so actually, you call this requirements, we are architects call it brief, but it's a kind of similar kind of stuff. So I think one really bit of this initiative, a really important bit of this initiative is to make sure that we not only find a common language, but make sure it's actually plain English language so that everybody can understand what is it we're talking about. There is no point in trying to be clever in front of others.
Thank you. I think we've only got time for one more question, which is, we have so many good questions, I'm going to have to pick some. So I'm going to put some together, which are around where does the panel think industry is at the moment? And there's a lovely question here about, I'll reach out. So what do those of us involved in major infrastructure, what can we do to help move the needle today, over the coming weeks and for the longer term? So my question for us is, where are we now? What can people do? I'll go to you, Mark, first.
Well, actually, I'm kind of thinking that this is our next section.
Yeah.
This is what we intend to do. So shall we do that? Because I think you've done a very neat segue, which is what next? What do we do? What can practically be done? And I'd just like to emphasise, by the way, the questions, quite a few of them are comments, not just questions, and they're brilliant. But this is exactly what we want to do. We want to build engagement and build support. So it's very encouraging to me to see that that's already happening just in the Q&A. But yeah, what are the next steps? What are we trying to do? How can people get involved? I think it would be good for us just to cover that in the last 10 minutes. And I think essentially, what we would like to do is up until the 3rd of July, we would like to build support for what we are presenting, because what is being presented here is not the final document. This is the penultimate document. We've involved lots of people in getting to this place already, but now feels the right time to share it wider, to kind of build more engagement so that we can get more support. And then hopefully on the 3rd of July to demonstrate that support. The 3rd of July will be more than just doing a big launch of a document with lots of support. Hopefully by then we will have built that. But what we would also like to do is have some clearer view as to how we can move forward on the recommendations. And in order to get the recommendations to happen, we think that we need to build some communities that are going to do the recommendations. Now, thankfully, a lot of those communities already exist, and maybe with a little bit of work, we can help to coalesce them and to connect them. And then that way forwards, we can see the recommendations being taken forwards. But what I think would be really good is if we can again come back to the panel to just unpack some of those next steps and on what that looks like and how people can get involved. So when it comes to the recommendations, I'm looking around for somebody to nod at me to say something a little bit more about the recommendations. Yvonne, you were instrumental in helping to get the recommendations to make any sense. So,
my view is recommendations are really a very comprehensive set of things that should be done to really make a proper impact and change things in future, and cover the things like education, people training, the culture shifts, also include some governance and how we can measure how we're actually doing in terms of systems thinking, provide a couple of recommendations, common understanding, common language, common high-level framework on the tools and methods we all use to move things forward. So the recommendations are elicited from, I can't remember, Mark, I think it was something like 55, 56 pages of absolutely great ideas from a number of workshops that Mark, Jess and Anna run for a period of time, including people from academia, from industry, from Royal Academy of Engineering, a few other institutions and so on. And in my mind, it provides a very comprehensive kind of springboard for future. My personal vision and hope is that we continue with this initiative, as I said, and the people who want to get involved get in touch, and we'll discuss what is the best way to move things forward. But I would suggest it will be through communities that we are not identifying, but basically saying there is a stuff here, we can get together as a group in this particular community of a common interest and push for things forward.
yes, yes. So I completely agree that kind of has to be the way forwards, because this is not some kind of huge funded initiative. It's something that we see an awful lot of people agree with. But in order to get things to move forwards with minimal funding, you kind of need the communities to stand up and then do something. And I think we are already seeing some of those communities either existing already, ready to go, and kind of keen to press forward. Other communities which are willing to be coalesced. And so just a quick word on the communities. I think we're seeing some great leadership now coming from the infrastructure client group, a really important group of the UK's leading, most forward-looking infrastructure clients. So it's absolutely fantastic that they're kind of leaning in and providing some leadership on this. I think there's the potential for consultants to come together in a collaborative way to work out which bit of this should be shared and which bit should be competed, because it makes no sense to compete on all of it, because otherwise we'll just pull it to pieces. There needs to be some element which is shared. I think potentially an academic community, and there were quite a few good questions around, you know, the kind of education and training. It's an absolutely key community to kind of feed people into this space who are systems thinkers, who are T-shaped, who can connect up. And then also the systems expert community, because there are some fantastic organisations out there. I mean, maybe I shouldn't name names, but there are some wonderful ones. I will mention the ISSS, the International Society for System Science, who are already kind of driving their own initiative to bring together the systems experts in a way that can provide the built environment with that expertise. We could imagine other communities, maybe finance, investment, insurance. And so hopefully with these communities kind of self-organising, driving forwards the things which make sense to them, and then doing a bit of connection, we can actually get an awful lot of stuff done. Another thing which will help to facilitate it would be a platform to help to connect it and bring things together. I don't know, Anna, if you might like to say a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I guess something that really has excited me about this the whole way through is it's not just a static document, and it's not a kind of a group of people telling other people this is how it should be. It's all about the engagement. And I think that's what the platform, which is one of the recommendations, really facilitates. That it allows people to kind of communicate and hopefully with common language and identify where systems thinking is valuable to them and really start those conversations. And I think it all kind of groups into this idea of actually kind of taking a systems approach to developing the connector, because it's actually about having those conversations, and it's about kind of creating the space for people to do that. So I think the platform will be such a great kind of enabler to breaking down those silos, and it's, you know, some people would choose to read things in a document, some people would choose to kind of talk and have the conversation, and enabling people to just have their kind of preference in how they want to communicate, and creating a space where people can really talk about what their common challenges, I think is a really exciting recommendation.
And if I can just
Can I just quickly add something also on the point about how others can help? I think to make this initiative tangible, we will have to apply the recommendations to some key priority challenge areas. And I think one of the mechanisms, apart from all the things that were already mentioned, where different stakeholders can help, is really help us shape those and drive the efforts in the first instance on the right type of challenge areas where we can showcase. This is the difference it will make tangibly in terms of, be it through cost lens, through regulatory lens, through the lens of sustainability. That will give it a lot more credibility, because then we can showcase and always point back to that and say, look, as a next step, we'll then be focused on a different challenge area. So I think that's another mechanism in which different stakeholders can get involved.
Absolutely, and if they can identify those challenge areas that make sense where systems thinking would appear to be able to add value, then the community, the broad community, can put their collective shoulders to the wheel and work on that challenge. But identifying those is something where our communities, our networks will be vital. It's not something that can be decided by a small group of people.
Yes, and I think that there are some clear opportunities which are kind of presenting themselves, which might be an ideal place to prove this. And I'm just thinking, for example, of the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor. You know, it's clearly a government priority. It's really important to drive economic growth there, but not just economic growth, other things as well, like climate resilience and no doubt better health outcomes. Wouldn't it be wonderful to demonstrate these systems approaches in something that focused, demonstrate that there really is a connection between systems performance and better outcomes, which can then be rolled out more broadly, hopefully across the nation. So I really like that point, Wolfgang, about the kind of the focused examples, which I think means we can learn and then share good practice. And Jess, did you want to say one thing before we wrap up?
Yeah, it was just on the platform, and I think it speaks to a wider point of kind of what the Built Environment Connective is, and not creating another silo, but actually being an enabler of that, and being there to be kind of a space for systems thinkers and systems thinking in the built environment, and providing things like the platform where tools, approaches, case studies, examples that have already been developed, because there's already so much knowledge out there, but it provides a space for that communication and for that sharing. And that is kind of the main purpose of the Connective, is to connect these different groups that already exist, open up opportunities for them to share in a more improved way, so we can all work together towards like this a shared vision of kind of flourishing generations and in the built environment. So
yes, that's absolutely perfect. We should actually end on that. I was going to try and say something similar, but you said it better. So what I'd like to do really is thank the panel, firstly for 15 months of volunteer effort to get us to where we are, but I'd also really like to thank everybody who's turned up and is starting to engage on this. I'd really encourage more engagement. Let's build that support for a big launch on the 3rd, where we can show some communities which have coalesced and are starting to kind of convene, connect, coordinate along the lines that Jess said. And clearly, this Connective that we're talking about is all of us. It's anyone who shares the shared understanding is part of us. And so with that, I'd like to really thank everyone who's joined. Please join in more. Let's engage. Make the 3rd of July turn into something really quite special. So thank you very much.